This lesson is about writing equations of lines and inequalities in slope-intercept form. In other words, how do I change an equation to the form y equals mx plus b? All right. To do this, what we need to do is simply get y by itself. Now, when it's an equation, it's no big deal. It's just simply solving steps. So you use opposite operations in order to get y by itself. In a little bit, we'll look at an inequality, and that's where you got to remember some rules. So let's take a look at this first one here. The very first equation says 3x plus 2y equals negative 14. We need to get this y all by itself. So the first thing we want to do is decide, is there anything that needs to be added or subtracted and moved across the equal sign? I have a positive 3x, so I want to subtract it to move it across the equal sign. Now when I rewrite this, I'm going to rewrite it as 2y equals negative 3x minus 14, working to get it into this form, slope-intercept. Okay, y equals mx plus b. All right, so there's my y. My y is still not all by itself, so now I need to get rid of this 2. The 2 is multiplying y, so therefore I'm going to divide to move it over. Opposite of multiplication is division. If I divide here, I have 2 more places that I have to divide. When I do this, I get y is equal to negative 3 halves x, and then I have 14 divided by 2, which I'm going to simplify that to minus 7. Okay, so let's try one more just to make sure that we're good with this. All right, I see my y. I got to get that all by itself. First thing I want to do is move this negative 2x. So to move the negative 2x, I'm going to add 2x to both sides. This all should look familiar because we did this earlier this year. I have negative 3y equals 2x plus 9. And now to get y by itself, I'm going to divide everything by negative 3. Make sure that you pay attention to the signs. The signs just don't disappear. Y is equal to negative 2/3 x. And I have a positive 9 divided by a negative 3, which will give me a negative 3. Y equals negative 2/3 x minus 3. So now let's take a look at our second scenario here. Our second scenario says now they want us to write an inequality. An inequality means a greater than or a less than sign. Okay? We have a special rule when solving. When solving an inequality for y, we have this thing called the special rule. And the rule says if you multiply or divide by, and there's your key. If I have to multiply or divide by a negative, then the inequality flips. The only time I got to flip the inequality is if I multiply or divide by a negative. All right, so let's do a few of these. It says write the inequality now in slope-intercept form. All right, we got to solve for y, which means get y by itself. I'm going to move the 3x by subtracting it. That leaves me with 2y is greater than or equal to negative 3x plus 8. And then to get y by itself, we divide everything by 2. Y is greater than or equal to negative 3 halves x plus 8 divided by 2, which would be 4. Okay? Now, one thing I noticed the last time we were doing this was quite a few of you guys wanted to divide before you added or subtracted. Remember, in each one of these scenarios, I am adding or subtracting the x over to the opposite side first. Then I worry about my division. Let's take a look at example number 2 here. On example number 2, I got to move that 7x. Remember, my goal is to get y by itself. So I'm going to add the 7x in this case. And that leaves me with 5y is less than or equal to 7x plus 20. To solve for y, divide everything by 5. And that leaves me with y is less than or equal to 7/5 x plus 20 divided by 5. Well, that simplifies to 4. All right? 2 more examples, and then I would like you guys to complete a worksheet. All right? So here we go. Solve for y. I got a negative 2x. I'm going to have to add it to move it across the inequality. I'm down to negative 3y is less than or equal to 2x plus 21. To solve for y, I have to divide everything by a negative 3. Because I'm dividing by a negative, I know that my inequality sign has to flip. So instead of it being a less than or equal to, it's going to become a greater than or equal to. And I have y is greater than or equal to negative 2/3 x. And then 21 divided by negative 3, well, that's going to be negative 7. All right? Pretty simple rule, but I have to be on the lookout for it. Okay, last example here. Got to solve for that y. I got to move the 5x. 5x is positive, so I'm going to subtract 5x to move it. That takes me to a new scenario where I have negative 8y. Don't forget that negative is greater than negative 5x minus 16. I'm going to divide by negative 8 in order to get y by itself. Because I divided by a negative, I know that my inequality has to flip. Greater than became less than. Negative 5 divided by negative 8, well, that's positive 5/8 x. Negative 16 divided by 8, negative 8, that's positive 2. All right, please complete worksheet 221 and be ready for the next class.